So this class should be in Lilu Nishmat, Asaf, Netanel, Ben Abraham, Raphael, and okay. It should be a refuah shlema for Lior Chen Bat Mazal, for Linor Bat Lior Chen, and for everybody who needs it, really not much. For everybody who needs it. Yeah. This is refuah. Is refuah or refuah shlema for who? Sipor Yehudis Bat Leadina. And for the people who sponsored this class,
probably one for Janice, but I don't know her mom's name.
Okay, we can do. Okay, well, she should be included. Hashem knows. Everyone who needs one should be healthy. Okay. So what we're gonna do tonight is discuss Tu B'Shvat and Shovavim and everything else in between. So before we do that, we just need to have a little bit of a preface, little hakdama. What is Shovavim? Someone actually just texted me, what is this? So Shovavim is 6 weeks Parshiot, starting from Shemot till next week Yitro, and it ends with Mishpatim. And why is this an inyan? Because this is the beginning of us leaving exile, leaving slavery, and ending with us receiving the Torah. For people who are not familiar with Hasidus and Kabbalah, so they look at the Torah kind of like a history book that we can learn lessons from. But the real truth is that if the Torah existed before the world existed, which Chazal says it does, so then the Torah is not limited by time and space. So if the Torah is not limited by time and space, when does it apply? The answer is always. So anything that you see in the Torah has to be taking place at every moment. And then once you realize that, and you look at the Parsha, this is why the Baal Tanya says you need to live with the times. It's very, very connected. So right now we're in a very special time called Shovavim. We have an ability. Yeah, right. Yeah, we have a special ability to do Teshuva now. And Teshuva does not just mean I'm hitting my chest and feeling horrible about myself. Teshuva means that you become who you really are. And I don't know anybody who doesn't want to do that, because that's the key to everything good in life. That's the key to joy. That's the key to happiness. That's the key to peace. That's the key to good relationships. It's the key to blessing. It's the key to parnasa. It's the key to being close to Hashem, really mamish. So, and we have Tu B'Shvat now. It's coming up. And this month, according to Kabbalah, is very connected to the Tadic. You guys, if you're familiar at all with Breslov Hasidus, you know that Rabbi Nachman has a tremendous fascination with the Tadic. And he actually feels like to be connected to a real Tadic, whoever that may be, is the most important thing that you could do in your whole life. And as a result of that, Rav Natan took this so much to heart that even though he never met anybody like Rabbi Nachman, and he knew for sure that this was his Tadic, in listening to his Tadic, he continued every single day in his Sipor to beg Hashem that he should be close to a real Tadic, just because he wanted to Mekayim his Rebbe Zaytza. Okay? So we have a special ability in this month, not just to connect to a real Tadic, but to actualize the Tadic within each of us. Because Rabbi Nachman explains that there's 3 Butchinos of a Tadic, and every single day you need to connect to these 3. The first one is whoever the Tadic of the generation is. And we're not going to get into that right now. Visit Hashem, you should pray on it, and I hope that Hashem shows you who it is, okay? Second is you need to speak to a good friend every day. Not just any good friend, but a good friend who's on the journey with you. Someone who you know is also trying to get closer to Hashem, who's honestly, and it doesn't matter where he's holding. He could literally be holding in a place he doesn't keep any of the mitzvah. But if he wants to get close to Hashem, you have to speak to someone like that every day. Because he says that that person has the point of the tzaddik within him to the extent that you can get something from that friend you cannot get from the tzaddik of the generation. And therefore, if you don't speak to a friend that day, you'll have missed out on that point for yourself. Okay? So you have the tzaddik, you have your friend, and then you have the point of the tzaddik within yourself. So I'm going to speak to the Tadic of the generation, which, what does that mean? It means I'm learning his teachings. So we're going to do that right now, Bezrat Hashem. We're going to speak to our friends. Thank God we have that all here with us. And then what about myself? How do I tap into the Tadic within me? I feel very far from that. I could barely get out of bed in the morning. So how am I going to become a Tadic? And if you know Chassidus, he doesn't just mean you're a good guy. It's a very high level to be a Tadic. And Rabbi Nachman says, by speaking to your own heart every day. You need to have a time that you speak to your heart, because there's a point of a tzaddik within you. The Baal Tanya says, even though that people think that the highest level of your soul is in your head, your mind, your neshama, and it's surprising because the Baal Tanya says this, and Chabad's whole thing is about Chochmah Bina Das, that is like the intellect, and that's the focus of the teachings as well. But he says that actually the highest part of every soul is within the heart of every Jew, the Pintel Yid. So this is the reason why Rabbi Nachman was so makpid that we should talk to Hashem every day, because that's how you illuminate that part of the tzaddik within you. These 3 steps. Okay, so Bezrat Hashem, we're going to do them all right now. So, with that being said, we have Tu B'Shvat coming up, and Shovavim, and this is the month of connecting to myself as the tzaddik, to illuminate that point of myself, to become that thing. So then how do we actually do it? I know a lot of people, they listen to like a lot of Torah anytime shiur, and or they listen to like clips, like really fire clips that are motivational. Whatever, they go to the mikveh every day, but they don't do anything else. Everyone has their thing, but usually they end up being the same after all of it. And it's very frustrating. And when I was thinking about this class and speaking to you guys, and I know how Shua is, I know how the Chassid is, I know how my friend from Uman is, and I think that I could just be open and honest and straight with you guys about everything, and try and just, I'm going to pray to Hashem right now that we should all be attached to all the real tzaddikim who are alive today, all the real tzaddikim who are buried in the earth, to the tzaddik Yisod Olam, Rabbi Nachman Fega. And that we should all have vessels for whatever's going to come out tonight, because I'm just going to speak the truth from my heart. Okay, so I hope it enters into your heart. It's not too much. We have 7 fruits of Israel, and we're supposed to eat these fruits on Tu B'Shvat. Now, what many people don't know is, how does this connect to the tzaddik? So the truth is that these 7 fruits are connected to the 7 lower sefirot. Exactly, corresponding. That's why there's 7. You have bread, right? Lechem. This is the chesed. You have barley. This is gevura. You have grapes, wine. This is tiferet. You have figs. This is netzach. You have pomegranates. This is hod. You have olives. This is yesod. And you have dates. This is malchus. And I want to draw a correlation between these 7 fruits, these 7 sefirot, and how to practically actualize those 7 levels of our soul within us. And
did you say bread?
The right side is wheat. Yeah, chesed is wheat. And I'm gonna give us practical tools for each of them, and then I'm gonna I'm gonna throw a challenge down at the end of the week, at the end of the class, and I hope Bezrat Hashem you guys will be in it with me. Okay, so we're gonna start like this.
We need a lot of days right now.
Thank God. Thank God. So start like this. This class for men, by the way. So if anybody's gonna watch this class, if you're a woman, you don't have to.
As long as it doesn't disturb the recording.
Okay.
Everybody should know the class is being recorded.
Yes, the class is being recorded.
For your quality assurance.
Yes. So it goes like this. I want to spend the next 2 weeks. We have 2 more weeks of Shovavim. I want to spend the next 2 weeks myself, and I hope everyone wants to join me to be a tzaddik as much as I can. And I'm gonna give us 7 levels of tools, Bezrat Hashem, that are very practical, based on very deep Kabbalah and Chassidus, and they all work. And I know because I've been doing them for years now. Okay, and everyone else who I know does these things.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, serious?
Yeah.
So you want to make like a WhatsApp group with
Yeah.
everybody's number here?
Yeah.
And like put down.
Just for the next 2 weeks.
Like, you already had this.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, ready?
Yeah, I hope so. If you guys are,
I started one already.
I want to do one specifically for this. Just 2 weeks for the guys who are here. You guys are okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have wheat, chesed. The first Jew ever, his name was Avram Avinu. We know he's called the Ish Chesed, the man of Chesed. He had 4 doors to his tent. Everybody could get on each side. He was kulo love, kulo Chesed. And he was also very hardcore. We all have a piece of Avram Avinu inside of us. This is the Chesed within us. There is a very fundamental part of being a tzaddik that Rabbi Nachman stresses to no end, that people poo-poo all the time, and they even wonder how this could help you become a tzaddik, and I've been asked this many times, so we're going to discuss it. But this is so absolutely fundamental that there is no way, and especially in 2022, 5782, that anybody can grow legitimately, substantially, in a real way, in a permanent way, without this. Reish Pei Bet, the most famous Torah in the Qumran, a Zamra, that he teaches from King David, who is the Butchinos of the Mashiach himself. That he says, as Zamra, I'm going to sing to Hashem, Be'odi, with this little bit. Be'odi is usually not even translated. Rabbi Nachman translates it. What's Be'odi? This little bit inside of me. I'm going to sing to you with this little bit inside of me. What's the little bit inside of me? That little bit of good. Rabbi Nachman says a Jew must judge every single other Jew favorably. In fact, there was a video that was sent out recently, Rabbi Jacobson. I don't know if you guys got to see that video. Did you guys get to see this or no?
Just about to. No.
Okay, good. So I'm just going to tell you what it says. It's Shema.
Most of them.
Yeah, okay.
But a Breslov?
Yeah, he talked about, yeah.
Exactly what it means.
Okay, good. Yeah, so all the rest of the rabbis started sending it out because they couldn't believe Rabbi Jacobson cited it.
Just want to let you guys know here. This
He
is
talks a lot about Rabbi
with
Nachman.
the
No, I'm sure. But
Even Crowley with the Zamra English.
okay, very good. No, Rabbi Jacobson is one of the best speakers in the world. He's also a genius. He actually, as a kid, he was the one who was held responsible, him and his brother, for recording down the sikhs of the Rebbe in 770, but he gave them on Shabbos, and they were hours long, and he was a teenager. So what do? He would sit there with his brother, and they would make sure they don't forget one single word. And as soon as Shabbos ended, they would write down the whole entire thing. It would go out to everybody in 770 on pamphlets. And when people ask him, how do you have such a good memory? And how do you know so much? And like, how do you see so clearly? He attributes all of it to doing that as a teenager. And he also happens to be like one of the most talented speakers, I think, in the Jewish world.
Yeah, he's really funny.
Yeah, he's great. So Rabbi YY brought up a story of his friend, I was assuming is a Chabad Chassid, but I don't know, who was in Uman recently. And he said, I have to tell you this story. The friend came over. He said, I was in Uman. And when he got to Uman, he came to the kever of Rabbi Nachman. He saw a guy there with peyot, very long, like Yaakov. Long and beautiful, like this. So it's not unusual to see that in Uman. But then he saw that he also had a very long ponytail. Now, usually, I mean, that's also not uncommon in Uman. But usually you have one or the other. Usually you have a guy who has very long tail like that, or you have a guy who has a very long ponytail. You don't usually have this and a very long ponytail. So this friend of Rabbi Jacobson, he's like, this has to be a juicy story. So he went over to him, and he skirted around the issue without actually getting to it. He said, why are you in Uman? He said, I came to pray by the Rebbe. He's like, okay, but like, what's the story here? Like, how'd you get here? He's like, nah, everything's good, same as you, whatever. And he kept pushing him. So eventually, he said, okay, I'll tell you the truth. I grew up to a religious family in Muncie, and I don't think that he connected to Judaism as a kid. He said he was a very good athlete though. And he used to ride this like scooter, and then eventually it became a motor scooter. And then eventually he opened a business with motor scooters. I think he was very successful in it. And he had people that worked for him as well. And he said, and then I got here. So he was like, but where's the where's the connection? So then when he saw that the guy was just not going to tell him what's going on, he's just like, just tell me what the deal is. Like, just straight up. Like, how did you get here? Why are you here? Blah, blah, blah. He said, okay, I'll tell you the truth. When I was trying to look for meaning in my life, which was recently, I ended up volunteering for Chai Lifeline. Not Chai Lifeline. What's it called? Chai Lifeline?
Yeah,
Oh, that's what it? Yeah. People who are terminally ill that are Jewish, you volunteer to help them. They have very little time usually to live. And when he was there and he was starting to connect spiritually, I'm assuming to Breslov Chassidus, he had a woman there who was terminally ill, and she barely had any hair left. And she had a very unique color hair. It was like blondish ginger, like almost between the two, which is not so common.
Blonde.
Yeah, something like that. That was her natural color hair. So she was explaining to him that the terminal cancer is not bothering her as much as the fact that she has no hair. And she can't find a wig that is the same color as her hair because of the color of her hair. So he realized that he had the same color hair as her. And he decided that he was going to grow out his hair so that he can then, when it's ready, shave it off and give it to her, and it would make it into a wig that she can wear. Amazing story. And that's why he had the long ponytail. But because his parents didn't approve of the look, they told him that if you're going to grow your hair out like that, you have to leave the house, which I know sounds crazy, but in Muncie it's not so crazy. And so he said, in order that I should honor my parents and not to bother them, I have been in Uman for the past 6 months. I came here on a flight. I've been here every day davening by the Rabbi. I have 2 more weeks left until my hair is long enough that I can shave it off and give it. And I'm going to go back and give it to her. And Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson's friend said that he had the most busha he ever had in his life. He felt so embarrassed that he judged him for having the ponytail and the peyot. And even though it wasn't like thinking the worst possible thing, it was a negative initial, like we all have very quickly, you may not even think about it, or just like, what's the deal? He left the room and he started crying. And it just made me think about a zamra. You have to judge every single person favorably. And even if you don't know that that's what's going on the other side, you have to make it up. Maybe he's doing it for this. Maybe he's doing it for any reason possible. And then Rabbi Nachman says, even for a Rosh Gamor, even for the worst person in the entire universe who's done the most horrific things that you can imagine, he's Jewish, says you have to judge him favorably. And then Rabbi Nachman says, Kol Shekain, that you're not that person. How much more so you have to judge yourself favorably. Okay? Rabbi Nachman's huge chiddush is that the reason why people are far from Hashem is not because they don't want to keep the mitzvot. It's not because it's too hard for them. It's not because it doesn't fit 2022. It's not a modern thing. It's a made-up thing. He says that's not the reason people do not want to be close to Hashem. He said there's only one reason, and he said the one reason is because when a person is not happy, he can't think clearly. And if a person can't think clearly, he can't connect to Hashem. Because connection to Hashem comes from Yishuv Das, being able to settle your mind. This is why you see in the Chazal that they used to take an hour before and after they davened. This is why you see that over the course of history, especially with the Hasidic masters, there was such an inyan of singing and davening, doing things that were so intensely fun.
Wouldn't that mean you're judging them as not being happy, which in itself is some kind of, not a sin, I guess, but like a...
No, so this is not a judgment. It's not a judgment.
But you're assuming that they're, would you call it?
That's not assuming. It's like for instance,
I guess.
We'll come up with some examples. I'm going to speak about it. It's a good question.
I'll specifically say that they themselves are not happy, so that's how they calm themselves. So if a person themselves says that they have a problem, then you're not judging them, or if they by some chance commit a crime.
Right.
In that particular case, it's like the Torah defines it as the time says somebody who admits their guilt, we do not. It is not lashon hora to avoid.
Right.
Somebody who, but a person who is not guilty,
Right.
and is not assumed to be guilty halachically, we don't judge them as if they're guilty unless they admit their crime. Admission doesn't have to be oral; it can be also by performance of deed.
Yeah.
Somebody who publicly kills is not. You don't judge them favorably because it's like they admit to their guilt.
Right. I understand. So we'll get more into it, Bezrat Hashem.
Simply, it's not human nature to be happy if you don't do anything to make yourself happy.
100%. We're gonna speak about that. But when Rabbi Nachman says happy, he doesn't simply mean like I got like a high recently and now I'm happy from that high, or I watched a sports game and my team won. He's talking about a very high state. Rabbi Nachman says that being happy is one of the hardest things for a person to do because it comes from the sphere of Bina. Bina is something which is above these 7 lower sefirot. Bina is something which is supernatural. It's transcendent. It requires a lot of work, a lot of growth, a lot of mastery in a lot of areas. So 1 second.
Yeah.
Is there a translation to Bina?
Bina means understanding. Usually it's translated in Chassidus as thought. And this is why if you take Machshava, it's Bes Simcha, the letters.
Shema is connected to Bina.
Right.
It's not. It's like subconscious thought.
Right.
Subconscious
So,
thought.
so one way that Rabbi Nachman gives us that he says is the most effective tool for maintaining happiness is to judge yourself favorably all the time. And now when I told this to students in the past, they said, but how am I ever going to grow? If I'm always giving myself l'chav zchut, so then how am I ever going to have the impetus to actually make a step? Because let's say, for instance, I wasted seed, let's say, and I don't want to waste seed. So if I'm always saying, no, you did a good job, you did the best you could every time, so then what's going to push me to ever actually do it? And Rabbi Nachman's chiddush is that any Jew who's truly happy doesn't want to waste seed. Because what's the reason a person wastes seed? To get that feeling. It's an amazing feeling. It's instantaneous. You control it. It's one of the only things that you know you have malchut over, and you can have it instantaneously. So what happens when I'm stressed? I do this. Why? Because instantaneous pleasure. But if a person is mamish happy, then I don't think to do it. It's like, for instance, you had the best day of your life. On the best day of your life, you were not thinking about it. Even if you're secular, you're doing things like that guy who's going to make a lot of money and he has this crazy deal with a celebrity that day. He's thinking about it all week. And it's like, this is the pinnacle of his work career. That whole day, he's not thinking about women at all. He is so locked into this because this is the most exciting moment of his life. The Baal Shem Tov and Rabbi Nachman are giving us over. We could be like that all the time. And when a person is locked into that, that joy, it precludes doing it. So this is a zamra. So what does it mean? Let's say practically.
It means finding alternative ways to alternative positive ways to cause a dopamine reaction.
No, don't go into all that. I know what you're talking. No, don't go there. Don't go there. It's very simple. It's very simple. When you judge yourself favorably, first of all, Chazal said the way that you judge others is how Hashem judges you. Part of the reason why a person struggles is because he has judgments. Rabbi Nachman doesn't say it explicitly in Torah because they don't want to scare you. But that's actually part of the reason why you're struggling to grow spiritually. Those blocks and those obstacles are coming from din and judgments. So how do I break those judgments? By judging myself favorably, I actually cause above to be judged favorably. And these dinim, these judgments break. And then teshuva is a lot easier, okay? So the first example would be like this. Let's say you said you missed mincha today. You wanted to get up, didn't. Now, if you really thought about it, maybe I could have done more in order to make sure that I got up, right? And you might focus on that. Most of us are pre-programmed by secular society, by Western society, which is very achievement-oriented, that I control the events that take place in my life. I'm going to cause myself to do this. And when it doesn't work out, it's my fault. But in the Torah, there's no such thing. To the extent that in the Gemara, they said that if a person tells you that they toiled and they didn't find, then don't believe them. But then say they toiled and they achieved. Why say toiled and they found? Found sounds like a lost object. Finding sounds like I just happened upon it.
Found themselves.
Because you don't do something. You find things that Hashem gives you. The way that you access those things is through trying hard. When you do the best that you can, then Hashem lets you find it. It's almost like it's in a chest. You're trying hard, gives you, let's say, a key, but then you open the chest, but what's in there is whatever Hashem wants to be there. So let's say you try your hardest and you put it like this, and there's nothing there. Would you ever blame yourself for that? No, because you didn't put it in the chest. But the way that we think about it is my efforts create the result. And as a result of that, when it doesn't happen the way we want, we beat ourselves up, even if it's subconscious. Rabbi Nachman says, don't do that. Because in effect, you're actually precluding yourself from being able to do the exact thing you want to do, which is grow. The main key to growth is to feel positive about yourself and about others. So this is the first. This is chesed, okay? Second is gevura. That's barley, okay? Rabbi Nachman speaks a lot about hitchazkut, about empowering yourself, about encouraging yourself, about encouraging others. He says that this is not nice, it's necessary to do it all the time. Even the Gemara speaks about there's certain things that need encouragement all the time. So how does a person encourage themselves? And how do you encourage others? First of all, it's very hard to do anything for anybody else in truth if you don't do it to yourself. And even if you do, when you don't do it to yourself, you're going to notice they don't do it. Because the ability for someone to actualize something that you give to them is based on the fact that you have actually achieved that to some level. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try and help people along the way, but what happens to a lot of people when they start learning Torah is they get really excited and they start thinking about all their family members and friends that need this. Rabbi Nachman says in the first Torah Likutei Moharan, there's something called the Yetzer Hara clothed in a mitzvah. I noticed that when people, like they get in this class and they start learning Rabbi Nachman's Torah, and literally they need it. We all need it. And as soon as they hear it, they start thinking about others. And it sounds like it's a beautiful mitzvah. And they come up to me after, like, how can I tell this? But they're not listening to me about this, but I really want to help them with this. I know they need this. The Yetzer Hara does not want you to actually take the advice, to take the wisdom and apply it to yourself. And if it thinks that the only way it can distract you is by you even thinking about how you can help somebody else, it'll do that. So, hitchazkut, first thing you need to do is encourage yourself. We just spoke before about a zamar, about judging yourself favorably, no matter what. This brings you to joy. Joy is what brings you to Yeshuv Das. When you have a settled mind, you're going to have the ability to actually get closer to Hashem, to work on yourself spiritually. Second is encouragement. And also, what would be encouragement? What would encouragement look like? I've spoken about this in the past, but I don't know everybody here or what you have heard. So I struggled with depression my whole life and anxiety. Ever since I was 10 years old, I've been seeing mental health therapists on and off. Every single year I had a depressive episode when I was a child. By the time I got to older and the pressure became more as I went through college, I also have a learning disability. So it became much, much harder. Everything in life became harder. And as a result of that pressure, I started to have more depressive episodes. Depression comes from feeling helpless. And I didn't have any emunah growing up. I never heard of Torah, never heard of Shabbat, I never heard of tefillin, I never heard of any of these things. No, so I was an atheist, self-proclaimed atheist, seemingly. So when you don't have faith and you have a lot of what they call in social work, you have a lot of vulnerabilities. So it's very difficult to make it out without eventually getting addicted to drugs or doing something harmful to yourself or to others.
It's also necessary to get the right.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No.
But just for the sake of the class, because it's going to be like an hour, I think at the end of the class, we'll have like a roundabout discussion and we'll talk about everything you guys want to speak about. So once I became Baal Teshuva, I thought that was it. Once I found Hashem, I'm like, I'm not going to have any problems anymore because I realized that God exists. And now, where did all my problems come from? They came from sadness and depression and anxiety. And where did that come from? From the fact that I thought there was no meaning in my life and there was no guiding principle in my life. Nobody's really taking care of me. I'm only taking care of myself and it's not working out. So I thought that was it. I actually had worse depressive episodes after I became Baal Teshuva. I had worse anxiety and I went through more struggles. Rabbi Nachman has an amazing lesson where he gave me tremendous yeshuv das, and he explains that you might think that when you find Hashem, problems are gonna go away. And you're gonna find that once you start the journey back to Hashem, you see that things get very tensely difficult. And he says that it's completely normal. It's what every single person who's ever been alive went through. And the main thing is not to give up. Okay, that's like it simply. So, but then, it's one thing to learn a Tadic's teachings. It's another thing to apply his teachings. Something that's very common, especially amongst Rabbi Nachman's Chassidim, is there's a learning of his teachings for years before actual practice of those teachings. Now, a person might think it's because I don't have time, or it just doesn't fit in my schedule, or I'm not interested. But the real reason is because if you apply the advice of the tzaddik who you're learning his teachings from, you will leave your problems. And the Yetzer Hara doesn't want you to. Because the advice is Eitzah Tova. Rabbi Nachman says Eitzah Tova brings the Geula, it brings redemption. Good advice brings redemption. Eitzah Tova comes from true tzaddikim. These true tzaddikim are literally sitting in the Torah. They're completely connected to the truth at the highest level. And as a result of that, it imbues emunah in you. And emunah is what brings Geula, okay? So I didn't know all this at the time. And so I spent 3 years just learning his teachings fervently. It was the only thing that was keeping me going in life when I was working a job all day and night, driving into Brooklyn, driving back at night. I barely got to see my girlfriend, ended up becoming my wife at the time. And I was very depressed. And I was a social worker and I was trying to help other people. So between all of that, it was a lot. And the only joy I had was learning Likutei Moharan on the train there and on the way back. It was my life force. It was my everything. But eventually what happens to a lot of people who don't want to let anybody know that they need help is it ends up getting very, sorry, I got sensory issues. Thank you. Yeah, it's part of my stuff. Sorry about that. My students said they should go crazy about this because they're like one little thing. I'm like, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Fiddling with things.
No, it's good. So eventually, I had a very severe depressive episode that lasted years, which is unusual. And I ended up in a psych ward. I ended up voluntarily putting myself in one because I was worried about what I was going to do to myself. This is after Rabbi Nachman. This is after Chassidus. This is after Torah. This is after Amunah. I was not doing the things that Rabbi Nachman said to do, or at least one specific thing most. And I got there and I said, this is it. Like, I have 2 kids at home. I have a wife, came from Israel to be with me. Everything I've tried to do in my life that I really tried has blown up in my face. Whether it was work or whether it was personal, whether it was family, whatever it was. I always thought as a kid, I had so much hope. All of us, we have dreams. And then a lot of them just get splattered. And for me, it was mayhem. And so when I was there in those garments, that dress, and I'm seeing these people around me, I said, that's it. Rabbi Nachman says that Hashem runs the world. And I've been learning that for years, and it gives me a lot of chizuk. But I'm not living like that. Because if he really does, then when Rabbi Nachman says it's very good to speak to Hashem for an hour a day, that was something that I found unfathomable to do. But if I'm actually going to change my life, it can't be me who does it, because that's what's caused me to be here. So Hashem's going to have to do it for me. If Hashem's going to do it for me, I'm going to have to invest time that shows that I believe that. And so I started talking to Hashem for an hour a day since then. Okay? Baruch Hashem, more or less successful for now, like a half a decade. Completely changed my life. And he fixed everything. And not only that, he has utilized that whole experience to now give chizuk and emunah and strength to people all across the world. which is unfathomable and very humbling. Okay, probably what I was praying for. So one of the things that I said when I got out of there is, for a period of a few months, I'm not going to listen to any person, even a rabbi, if I don't get tremendous encouragement from what they're saying. You know, some rabbis, they're saying things that are true, they're from the Torah, but they make you feel bad about yourself, or they make you feel overwhelmed, or they make you feel stressed. I said, the only way I'm going to get out of here is if I listen to those 2 or 3 rabbis that every single time I hear them, I get chizik, and I think I can even leave this behind. I can even elevate from that place. And it ended up being like 2 or 3 Breslov rabbis that really encouraged me. Mom saved my life. I only listened to them for a few months, and I didn't listen to anything else. You need to have chizik in your life. Rabbi Nachman says that chizuk is not some small thing, because I know a very great tzaddik, he says, that if he would have ever got chizuk, he would have been much greater than he was. And he was speaking about himself. How does a person say that? You ended up doing something, which Rav Itchemeir Morgenstern, who is one of the greatest tzaddikim of the generation, he said that Rabbi Nachman is the greatest revelation of Torah ever. He says he represents the yechida of the soul, more than the Baal Shem Tov, more than the Arizal, more than Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, more than Moshe Rabbeinu. Obviously, they're all really all one thing at different levels, but he said I would have been much greater than I was if anybody ever encouraged me. So besides encouraging yourself with a Zamra, you need to listen to people who are really encouraging. I'm not just in my stam encouraging, but when you hear them, you're motivated. Even if you listen to like 2 minutes a day of someone who gives a motivational speech that makes you feel like, oh, I can do this. You have to do it every day, once a day, okay? So this is the second step. This is the barley. Just like the barley is very hard. Nachon? Barley's hard. It doesn't break. You need that chizik. You need it, no matter what you're going through, and you won't break, okay? So these are first two. Then we have wine. Okay. Now this is going to get a little bit, move off of the positivity aspect for a second, which is, it's connected. But we're going to move into something that Rabbi Nachman was very emphatic about. And the reason I'm going to say it to you is because this is part of what changed my life, besides talking to Hashem for an hour a day and begging for everything, thanking for everything, talking about my issues and struggles. This is something that was very hard for me to do. This is something I had to be very desperate to even try. And this is something that I had to daven on. And it was in a roundabout way that it brought me there, because I struggled with the Brit for a long time, even after I heard what's going on with it. And I believed it. And I just could not stop. And in fact, like a lot of people, when they start learning about it, when they try to stop, it actually comes harder. And I remember I was in Bodidud in my room. I was crying to Hashem. I was literally crying. I said, that's it. Like, I'm doing the best I can. I actually can't do this. I literally can't stop. And I know you want me to. So if you want me to, you have to do something for me. You have to give me something that I need to see now when I open up this book. You need to let me hear something from somebody. You need to give me whatever it is that I need, that I could become Shmirat Brit, because I've been trying for years and crying about it, and I'm not successful. And I opened up my Likutei Moharan to a random place. And Rabbi Nachman says that secular wisdom causes a person to waste seed. What the heck does secular wisdom have to do with wasting seed? It's a very deep inyan. Rav Natan says in Likutei Halachot that the Eitz Achaim is the Torah. I mean, he's not the only one who says this. The Zohar says this, everyone says this. The Chiddush is that the Eitz Da'at Tov V'Ra, the tree of knowledge of both good and its opposite. Da'at literally means to connect two things which are opposite. So really it was the connection of something which was both good and the opposite. What was that? If the other one was some form of consciousness that's called Torah, then the other one also has to be some form of consciousness. And he says that Rabbi Nachman explains it's chokhmot chitzoniyut, secular wisdom. And just like in secular wisdom, there's good in it, there's also the opposite. And you can't get around that in every piece that you learn. And he said, I'm going to give you every tree. Just don't eat from this tree.
What does Rabbi Nachman mean by secular wisdom? You define the term.
Yes, very good. When Rabbi Nachman says secular wisdom, he's referring Badavka specifically to any type of wisdom or any thought process, any current of information which deviates from the principles of the Torah, which can be philosophy, which can be science, depending on what element of science they're trying to bring out. This could be a newspaper that you read about articles of that week. And I'll give you a story after to try to show you that this was not even just Rabbi Nachman's inyan, it was an inyan from the Baal Shem Tov and the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it was a big
Politics too.
Politics. And so how does, first of all, what's the problem? First of all, it doesn't fit in with 2022. It just doesn't. Like this, nobody's ever doing this, right? Seemingly. Okay. On top of that, how does this cause me to waste seed? Okay. So Rabbi Nachman explains that what causes a person to waste seed is excess. You know, the Brit Milah, on the 8th day, what do we do to symbolize that we have the Brit, which obviously is the concept of being shmir to Brit? We cut off the excess that we don't need, but we were born with. Now, even though we usually think about excess in terms of, let's say, excess food or excess activities, there's also wisdom, which is called excessive according to the Torah. And that's called secular wisdom. And when a person is indulging, he's cogitating, he's meditating, he is internalizing secular wisdom, even though it has good in it, it's considered excess of the mind. And any excess that's in the mind, just like psychologically, it has to express itself in some way. Let's say in psychology, they would say it's through the emotions. But then Rabbi Nachman takes it even deeper. He goes, okay, and then where does the excess of the mind, which finds itself in the emotions, find release? In the Brit. And the only reason I actually tried this is because it was right after I cried for an hour to Hashem about being shmir to Brit, opened up the book, and then I saw that. So I said, that's it. This is crazy. I don't know what this has anything to do with keeping the Brit, but I'm not able to do it. I asked you for advice. Help me open the book. This is what I popped to. It's on the Brit. This is how you do it. I said, for 1 week, I am not going to look at anything which I might even, which maybe even Rabbi Nachman didn't even mean, which might be secular wisdom. That week changed my whole life. My whole life. Not only, thank God, Baruch Hashem, Bezrat Hashem, until the end. I haven't wasted since then, which has been years, thank God. But on top of that, Rabbi Nachman says depression also comes from excess. And emunah is impossible to achieve with this. So Rabbi Nachman says it's, even though he says when it comes to halakha, and it's based on the Gemara and Avodah Zarah, it says we're not angels. We're not supposed to be. So when it comes to the Torah that the sages gave you, do what it says. Don't take chumrot on yourself. You know, when you become Baal Tshuva, you want to go everything at like the highest level. There's a eruv. I'm not going to carry that, just in case. But Chazal have a whole masechet in the Gemara about how it's good. You can use it. So what are you doing when you're saying that I'm not going to because I want to make sure? In a very subtle way, it's an arrogance to think that I know more, and that's part of the interruption of getting close to Hashem. Humility is part of having emunah. It's part of being close to Hashem. Believing in the sages is a very important part of getting close to Hashem. So Rabbi Nachman says when it comes to halakha, keep everything in the Shulchan Aruch, but not any more than it says. You could take one mitzvah that you want, because the sages say this, make it like your thing. That's good to do, but that's it. But this person who's so makel on everything, halachically, says that for a Jew, learning secularism is asur. It's asur, like eating treif, like eating non-kosher food, like going to a strip club. How is he so intense about this when everything else he's like, basimcha, and take it easy, relax, judge yourself favorably, all about encouraging yourself. You wouldn't think that that's the same person who would tell you secular wisdom is asur. But the reason is very deep, because the whole the whole deterioration, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, started with Adam Rishon and is recreated at every moment when we ate from the Eitz Adat Tov Ra. Okay? So I started with 1 week of not doing it. Part of my challenge to us is, if you're up for it, to take these 2 weeks with me to try it and say to yourself that after it's over, I will look at everything I want to. I'm going to be involved as much as I want to in all of these things, because you have to be tricky with your Yitzhar, otherwise you're never going to start, right? And after this, I'll back to who I was, but I'm going to try for 2 weeks, okay? If you want to with me. I promise it's going to change your life. Change your life. Okay, good. So this is the wine, B'ezrat Hashem. This is the Tiferet. Then we have Netzach. Netzach is the figs. Netzach is Gematria Nachman. Netzach is Gematria Pesach. Why was Rabbi Nachman Netzach? Because Netzach means you never, ever, ever, ever give up. Never give up. And Netzach also means you don't care what people think about you. People do not realize how big of a barrier this is to you getting close to Hashem. Rabbi Nachman says in the 22nd Torah of Likutei Moharan, which I wrote about in the Parsha sheet that I did this past week. I highly recommend people read it. It's short. It'll give you chizuk b'ezrat Hashem. It's real. And I speak a lot about this, that when the ocean split, we went in without knowing what was going to happen. And even though we think that the ocean even just split once Nachshon went in, the truth is, the Vilna Gaon says it, Rabbeinu Bechaya says it, it didn't split like that. Every step they took, it split a little more. Every step they took, it split a little more. So they had to have another increase of emunah with every single step. And you think about our lives, oh my gosh, I'm in that sea all the time. How do I get to the next step? Emunah. How do I get to the next step? Emunah. It's an unbelievable thing. And Rabbi Nachman says that we say a pasuk in Az Yashir, that Hashem, you redeemed us in your kindness. Through boldness, you bring us to your divine makom, to your divine space. Rabbi Nachman says you learn from this that the only way you could split the sea and get close to Hashem is through boldness, which people famously quote as holy chutzpah. Okay, holy chutzpah doesn't mean that I insult somebody on my quest to Hashem. It doesn't mean that when people are like, what are you doing? I start fighting with them about it. It's within yourself, the chutzpah. You have the chutzpah to listen to yourself at the highest level and not to listen to anything else. I have people in my class in yeshiva, I have people over the course of the years that I've been teaching this and that I've connected to, they mamish believe things in the Torah 100%. But because they do not want to deal with the repercussions of what it's going to be like if people see I'm so religious. It looks like I'm so religious. It looks like I'm acting so religious, right? I don't want people around me to judge me. You know, if I grow up modern Orthodox, I don't want people to think because I changed my kippah from something which was knit to something which is blah, blah, blah. Not that this matters. It really has nothing to do with anything, but just giving an example. I don't want to because of how someone's going to look at me. I don't want to, let's say, not go to a regular university because I'm learning these teachings. I want to now go to the yeshiva, but I can't because the community I grew up is going to look down upon me because for 18 years, they thought I was going to go to the best school and do the best thing, all these things. For you to get close to Hashem, Rabbi Nachman says explicitly, it is impossible to achieve Kedusha without boldness. You cannot do it. So part of Hibodadu, part of the time that you talk to Hashem needs to be a tefillah. Hashem, help me to live with the truth, unadulterated, whatever that is in my heart, no matter what it looks like, no matter where it takes me. And you're going to have a lot of haters. I'm telling you right now. And you probably already feel that if you've already tried. And it's not even normal. I heard somebody, when I was in Queens, they started learning these teachings. They start trying to apply them. And they come up to me like, David, I don't know what happened. Everyone liked me until now. They don't even know I'm learning these things. And I started to try to do it. I started to try to be smear with the Brit. And literally people just like start trashing on me. I don't even know what's going on. I heard somebody when I was in Queens, they said the word Nachman. And somebody came over and started fist fighting him. That's not normal. I'm saying like, it's not B'teva. It's not a normal experience. Can you imagine someone says oh, I'm going to do something that the Rambam says. What the heck is this? And starts fist fighting you in the middle of a big Knesset. He had legal problems because of that.
That's assault, brother.
But I'm saying it's not even like the non-Jewish world. So I went to a club and I had a guy who's like way bigger than me, who shows up in front of me and he does something to me. And then my whole rep is ruined. So I don't want to ruin it. So I'm going to pretend like I'm going to fight him, even though I have no intention to, so that people around me think that I'm not a wuss, right? This is in a big Knesset with Jewish people who believe that the Torah is true. Why would you fight with somebody because they want to get as close to Hashem as possible? Does anybody have a problem with learning a lot of Torah? No. Does anybody have a problem with getting very close to Hashem? No. Does anybody have a problem with being Shmirat at the Brit? Kol hakavod, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And you say that you're trying to do these things? Oh, how did you get there? Nachman, boom! It doesn't make any sense. It's exactly what the Torah wants you to do. This person's helping you do it. Why would anybody not want you to go that way? Or at the very least, shouldn't be physically fighting you, shouldn't be emotionally fighting you. I have students literally in every place that I've ever taught, they get so much flack for this. It's not normal. And that should give you tremendous chizuk. Because it's not normal, it should show you that it's real. That it's real. Because it's not normal. Okay? When I wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael, I got flamed. You have students in Queens. Right? There's every single. Rabbi Nachman says any person who tries to dissuade you from living in the land of Israel is a bechina of the spies. You cannot listen to them. But there's amazing people who say this. These are big tzaddikim who say this. Rabbi Nachman says you can't listen. You can't listen. Because they were also big tzaddikim who went to spy the land of Israel and came back. And because they had positions outside of the land of Israel and they weren't sure what they would look like in the land, not so unlike us, that we don't know what the job's going to be, we don't know what the position's going to be, we don't know how people are going to look at me, how much money am I going to make, am I going to live in an apartment instead of a house, am I having a car or a bus? Can't listen. And when people ask me, I just said simply, because this is something that religious people are fans of. My Rebbe told me to go. If you say my Rebbe told me, it's okay. Because the Chazal say that if he says go right, even if it's left, you do it. And if not, not. So when people say if it's about Sfar, if it's about logic, so then they're going to kill you on the logic. But if you just simply say my Rebbe told me to, there's nothing a religious person can tell you. Because that's it. Okay. So have the courage to be who you really are. All the way. All the way. I remember one time I was doing Hiboded in the field. I think it was before Shavuot. And I was like, I had this weight on me. Rabbi Nachman says, he had a lesson once. It was unbelievable. I tell the story all the time. He gave a lesson to his Hasidim about how, to the degree that a person lacks emunah, to that degree, everything in his life is heavy. And Rav Natan, you know, like when you hear lessons, like even now maybe, you start thinking about some of these things and applying it to your life. I'm like, hey, how's that? How's that? Rav Natan heard this, and unusual for a chassid with his Rebbe, that they think he's like, well, he got up and he said, you're saying I don't have a munah? Because he thought to himself, oh my gosh, everything in my life is hard. My relationship with my wife is hard. My relationship with my kids is hard. My trying to get close to Hashem is hard. My learning Torah is hard for me. Everything is hard for me. And he said to him, if there's anything I have after being by you for these years and giving everything I got, I have a munah. And Rabbi Nachman said, it's true. You believe in Hashem, but you don't believe in yourself. And that became his mission the rest of his life, was to get to the point that he could believe in himself. And this is not a nice thing. There's no way to get close to Hashem without it. And I remember I was like sitting in the field and crying because I was struggling and everything was heavy for me. And I literally screamed to Hashem. I said, Hashem, give me a new heart. Give me a new heart that's not so heavy. I beg you. And I didn't leave the field. I said, I'm not leaving here for the Chag. I need a new heart. I don't want one. It's not nice for me. I am slowly withering away. I want to be close to you. I need a new heart. You have to give it to me. And then Hashem pops something into my mind. Rabbi Nachman says that you have Ruach HaKodesh when you speak from your heart and you literally have Hashem speaking to you through your own heart. And the thought that popped up into my mind is that the reason why everything is so heavy for me is because there's a part of me that's affected by the fact that I don't know how people perceive me and what I'm doing. And because I don't fully believe in my journey and my path, without any, I can't be fully happy. And I said, that's it. From now on, that's it. I don't care anymore. I'm going to believe in myself. I'm going to be me all the way, no matter what it looks like. And I got a lot of flack for it. And people had a lot of conversations with me, had to talk to me a lot of times to sit me down. Hey, this is not so normal. And this, police come into the woods. Friend to arrest me. What are you doing out here? Talking to Hashem. But you're singing and dancing and clapping, isn't that? I said, yeah, that's how I do it. Don't you think it's weird that you're in the forest, talking to God, singing, dancing, clapping? I said, no, but I could see how you would. That's what I need. I need to do that. If I don't do that, I go into depression. So how am I going to get to the point I could do that when that's not considered normal? You have to believe in yourself. Okay. Netzach. Hod. The pomegranate. Oh, it was figs. Figs. Okay. Hod, the pomegranate. This is a very, very important one. It's based a lot on what we're saying. A lot of times when we hear advice, even from Tadic that we believe in, we don't apply them. What's the reason we don't apply it? It's very simple. We don't believe he really understands me and where I'm at right now. Right? Let's say, for instance, we see that Rabbi Nachman says, the best thing that you could possibly do, even more than learning, even more than anything, is to take a time that you speak to Hashem. He says the highest thing. So he said, but he doesn't know that in 2022, people don't have time. He doesn't know that in 2022, it's not normal to go into the woods and do that. He doesn't know that in 2022, it doesn't fit with the work schedule, it doesn't fit with technology, it doesn't fit life now.
My Rabbi says Bittul Torah.
Maybe my Rabbi says Bittul Torah. Right. Okay. So Rabbi Nachman says that there are illnesses that a person can't heal from for one reason, because they don't have emunat chachamim. They simply do not believe that tzaddikim are real, that there's such a thing as people who have reached such a high level, and that all the Torah that they give is true, like mamash, like it came from Har Sinai, that all the advice they give is 100% true, like it came from Moshe at Har Sinai. Because a person doesn't believe that there's such people in every generation, Rabbi Nachman says they can have an illness and never recover from it. So one of the most important things that we can do is to trust tzaddikim that they do know us. And in the Arizal speaks a lot about the fact that in fact we're all sparks of the soul of the tzaddik of the generation. So to the Mashiach himself, which is why we're all the way that we are, because the Mashiach is going to be like us, because we're all sparks of the soul of the Mashiach. Rabbi Ginsburg speaks about this. They said, how do you know who the Mashiach is going to be? And he said, is there any telltale signs? And he said, he has to be someone like you. He has to be someone just like you, just like the people of the generation. Must be struggling a lot. So if we're all sparks of the souls of real tzaddikim, so then it must be when they give advice, they do know me. And that he did know what would happen. And he did know what we would be going through. And obviously, if you just look in the teachings, you can see from big tzaddikim, they spoke things out that they obviously did know exactly what was going to happen. I mean, I'm not going to go into all of them, but it was clear Rabbi Nachman knew exactly what was going to happen. Okay? So to really believe, and what does it mean when you believe something? Very, very simple. You do it. That's what it means. If I told, like, if you believed whatever, I'm not just saying that you should, but if you believed whatever we said at the table today, you really believed it, there's only one response: to do it. If there's like a little bit of a doubt, so then I might not do it. But if you truly believe that this is going to lead to this, then you would do it. Just like if you went to a lawyer and you needed help with an immigration case and you paid him a lot of money, he's the best immigration lawyer in the world, and he never lost a case before. So when he gives you an eitzah, and that's not your field of expertise, you're not in immigration, you don't know these things, and you paid him all that money, you know what you're going to do no matter what he says? Do it. But when it comes to tzaddikim, that they work their whole entire lives to achieve the highest spiritual level possible, that they had complete Mesir Nefesh, they don't care about themselves at all, and did everything for Klal Yisrael, for that generation, and for the future generations to Mashiach to come. That when they give us advice, we don't think they know what they're talking about. Or we do, but we don't think they know us. Like secular wisdom. He didn't know that that would be all we had now. He did. So one of the ways, and one of the biggest ways to grow, is when you come and you learn, even a Gemara. Hashem, help me to believe that whatever I'm going to read now is completely true. It's a whole different learning. Anything you learn, the Shulchan Aruch, Mishnayot, Kabbalah, Chassidut, Shas, anything you learn, it's a different learning. If I go in like, oh, maybe this is true, and maybe this is not true. Or if I come into the learning, I literally say, Hashem, please help me to know that whatever I'm about to read, no matter if I understand it or if I don't understand it, whether it fits my intellect or it doesn't, this thing I'm about to read is completely true. That's called Emunat Hachamim. And this is something that's absolutely necessary to become a tzaddik and to connect to tzaddikim. Now we have the Aleph. Shovavim is a very auspicious time to do Teshuva, like we spoke about, to become your highest self. The Torah says that the Jewish people are kulam tzaddikim. We're all tzaddikim. We're all tzaddikim. The fact that you're a Jew means that you're a tzaddik in potential. The Zohar says, what does it actually mean to go from potentially being a tzaddik to being a tzaddik? There's something very empowering that it says, because it's only one thing, and on the other hand, it's very daunting. And that is that the Zohar says that anybody who shmirat the brit is a tzaddik. So on the one hand, it's one thing. It's one thing, right? If you thought in the past, when you heard from tzaddikim, it means I need to know all of Shas, I need to know all poskim, I need to know. So that's never going to happen. So I'm never going to be. So the Zohar says, no, you can be. It's only one thing. It happens to be the hardest thing in the world, Rabbi Nachman says. And we all experience that. But it's one thing. What's the connection to the olive? We know that Chazal say the Jewish people are like olives because they only, through the process of crushing the olive, produce oil. And that oil is one of the most lucrative and most valuable things in the world. Obviously, at the time, it was even more so in the trade market. But oil, according to Kabbalah, comes from the sphere of Chokhmah. So this is very high. This is something completely supernatural. And Chokhmah, according to Chassidus, heals. Mamash heals. So how do I draw down that Chokhmah that can heal me? It's through being Shmirat Brit. And you have a special ability during these last 2 weeks to make huge gains in this. Huge gains in this. The Aleph. This is connected to Yosef, the Tadic. It's very interesting because usually when we attribute wisdom to people, we attribute to Shlomo Melech, it's the wisest man who ever lived. We attribute it to Moshe Rabbeinu, he's the greatest tzaddik who ever lived. We attribute it to all these great tzaddikim. Yaakov Avinu, it's connected to the Torah. Okay, great. Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg says in some ways, Yosef was the wisest person who ever lived. How is that possible? He would spend most of his life in the jail. He spent most of his life in exile. He had no ability, means to learn, to connect. How did he get all that wisdom? So this is a very deep thing. In the Sfirot, in Kabbalah, they explain that the Yesod, which is the second to last Sfira, it's the only Sfira that's capable of going all the way up above the 7 lower Sfirot and entering into the place of Mochi, the place of Chokhmah and Bina. It then draws down higher consciousness from that place and brings it back down to the Malchut, which is actualized. The only one that does that. So when a person becomes Shmirat Brit, what happens is his yesod, when it becomes rectified, he unlocks a higher level of consciousness. One in which Rabbi Nachman says it's the entire way to get all your prayers answered, to achieve Amunah. Because Rabbi Nachman says that the way in which a person gets his prayers answered is only when he has Amunah, and Amunah can only come from being Shmirat HaBrit. Rabbi Nachman says to such an extent that if a person is completely Shmirat HaBrit, Rabbi Nachman says at that point he will get all of his prayers answered. That's crazy. And to show it, he then says, then if I'm going to get all my prayers answered, but who says I'm praying for the right thing? So he has to give.
So where is the temple?
1 second. He needs to
Where
give.
is the base of Mikdash? It's not true.
No.
Otherwise, the base of Mikdash would be here. Because for sure there's been somebody who's been Shomer HaBrit. There's no base of Mikdash. It's not true.
Okay,
False.
so in Chassidus they explain. In Chassidus they explain that the Yisrael speaks about this. Da'as is the Beit HaMikdash. This sphere of Da'as is the Beit HaMikdash.
The sphere of Keter, according to the Mao, is the base of Mikdash.
Okay, and Da'as is Keter in actual.
Mm-hmm.
Da'as is the same thing as Keter. It's just
That's
that.
what he says.
It's drawn down Keter.
That's just enough between.
No, Keter is hidden. Drawn down Keter is Das.
No, that's not.
Yes.
That's what Rabbi Abraham.
Okay, we'll do
Abraham
the question. We'll talk at the end. Okay. To the extent that Rabbi Nachman says that you need to make sure that you give tzedakah before you pray, because it's going to help you pray for the right things. Because that person will get his prayers answered. Okay.
Are you talking about voters first?
This is Yesod now. This is Yesod. Yesod is the Aleph. Aleph.
And what about the Tadic?
Yeah. So he's the right. You want to know about it? You're asking about it? Okay. So the Arizal, he explains that there's a Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation. It's the same actual person. It's a soul which is reincarnated every Jubilee, the Arizal explains. And every Jubilee, the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu comes back down again. Yeah. So which is very fascinating, because if you do the math, the Arizal explains how many Jubilees will there be if 6,000 years the world will end and we'll move into a new level of existence, a higher level of reality. So how many Jubilees will there be in 6,000 years? And the answer is 120. How long did Moshe Rabbeinu live? 120 years. The Arizal says this is not just how many years he lives, this is how many times he comes back down. It's alluded to by the fact that he goes to 120. Okay. There's many tzaddikim in every generation. Chazal say there's 36. In Kabbalah, they actually said there's 36 revealed and there's 36 hidden. So there's 72. It's a lie, thank God. But the Arizal says, and Rabbi Nachman, this is a big inyan Chassidus, and then Rabbi Nachman is very makpid about it for a lot of reasons. That is that even though there's all these tzaddikim in every generation, all those tzaddikim are rooted in the tzaddik of the generation. Just like all the tzaddikim were connected to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he had those 70 judges, but in reality, they're getting their da'as, whether they know it or not, from Moshe. Okay? So Rabbi Nachman says that your ability to become a tzaddik yourself is dependent on all the advice you're getting being completely true. And he says that there are tzaddikim that even though their advice might be 99% true, but whatever percentage that it's not completely true, like it's a mitzvah from Har Sinai, so that little bit is going to infiltrate into your life and it's going to actualize. Because he explains that when a person gets advice, let's say, what happens when a person gets advice? He just thinks it's like a simple thing, right? After this class, you saw someone's like, it's like, yo, bro, I got a sick job for you. You're going to make more money. You're not going to have to work as hard. You're going to be able to learn more. Like, it sounds great. Who knows where this person's holding, and who knows why he thinks that? And this person, may or may not be the tzaddik of the generation. Okay, so when he gives you advice, what happens to that advice? Rabbi Nachman says it's the same thing as when you have union with a woman. You give off your seed. The seed is then brought into the womb. It fructifies. Yeah. For the next 9 months, it then develops that seed, becomes a living organism, a whole, and then you give birth. So Rabbi Nachman says, even though we don't think about it this way, intellectually, there's also a concept of union. Every single time you get advice, you're having union. Someone's placing seed in your mind. And that seed has to give birth. The issue is, it could be years before it does or it doesn't. And that could be a lot of issues that come along the way. And this is why Rabbi Nachman says it's so important that your advice is not coming not just from tzaddikim, but the tzaddik of the generation, because his advice is completely true, like Moshe Rabbeinu, and therefore it always works.
We shouldn't take advice from others.
This Rabbi Nachman says problematic.
Meaning what you do with their seeds.
You don't act on it, or even
It has to come out eventually.
right. So, like for instance, I know it's like not popular, and I know like even like in the yeshiva world, this is insane that you wouldn't just get advice from Rabbi. Who are you? That these people have been learning their whole life and are dedicated to, and you're not going to ask them for advice. I don't ask anybody for advice except for people who I consider to be Tzadikei Emet. And even if that advice ends up looking something completely different than everybody else is doing. And so when somebody comes over and might give me advice, between me and you, I'm not really listening. I don't ever embarrass somebody. I don't ever make somebody feel like I'm not listening. But just like when somebody speaks Lashon Hara, right? You are also chayiv when you listen. So there's an inyan, even in halacha, of you receiving it as truth. But if you don't, it's all good. So when I speak to people, right? So I, just like
You're saying we shouldn't listen to you.
so this is no, so this is a good point. So he said, so then you shouldn't, and you shouldn't, based on this, you shouldn't. However, Rabbi Nachman says, but when you listen, and you can't get the eitzah from the tzaddik himself because he's not available, then go to his students.
How do you know there's a true something?
That's for after the class visits. Hashem will speak about. Okay, whoever that may be, whoever it is, I'm not going to go into names, but whoever that may be for you. Okay.
You mentioned you have multiple tzaddik every team that you sell. So there's multiple of each generation. There's the relationship with Alex.
Right.
Other tzaddikim of the team.
Right, but there's tzaddikim who are branches off, but if they're giving, let's say, eitzah, which contradicts the eitzah of the tzaddik that you're listening to, it's problematic. So it would have to be something which falls in line with the tzaddik of the generation. Okay, and I know that this is very unconventional. I know that this is not very popular. I'm just telling you this is a life-changing thing, and also brings you tremendous clarity in your life. Okay, last thing, okay, is the Malchus, is Tamar, the date. You'll notice the date is very problematic. First of all, it has a pit inside. So if you eat that pit, it hurts your teeth. Secondly, they're infested with bugs a lot. And you have to check them really good. Even if you're makel, you have to check them really good. And on the other hand, if you ever had a date from the land of Israel, of those plump dates, nothing sweeter. Mom, I mean, if you had candy before, so it's going to tarnish it for you. But if you didn't eat candy all week, and then you have one of those dates from the land of Israel, the real ones, not like the, what I'm talking about. Yeah, the hard one. I'm talking about like a real thick, fresh one. It is the sweetest thing in the world. Okay. Just as a side note, if you put, I learned this from my cousin-in-law, I think. I don't know how you say, but yeah, if you put a nut in there, it's really good. Like a like a walnut. Yeah, it's like yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sure. Okay. But this is not advice from the Tadic, so this is you take with caution. Or at least I never heard him say it. I didn't get through all his teachings yet. So he says it in everything. Yeah, he does it in everything. So how's that connected to the Malchut? Because we know that the Malchut is Tefillah. Okay? And the Malchut is also Emunah. The Malchut, according to Kabbalah, is very prone to getting kidnapped. Very prone to getting captured. Ever play Capture the Flag? Okay. So imagine that it was always capture the flag for her. Rabbi Nachman has a story called The Lost Princess, in which she's constantly being kidnapped. Because in Kabbalah, they explain, just like the Nachash could not directly get Adam Rishon to make an error, he had to speak to Chava, because Chava represents the Malchus. In our life, that represents our Emunah. The reason why it's so hard to believe in Hashem, not just Stam, he exists, which already is very hard, but then even more so that he controls everything that takes place, it's even harder. And then even more so, like the Rabbeinu B'chaya says, like Rabbi Nachman makes a point of, that this is the essence of Emunah, is that to believe that Hashem is Machadesh, that he's renewing reality at every single moment, and therefore whatever has been could change in one instant. And if you don't believe that, you don't really have Emunah in Hashem. That belief is very prone to getting kidnapped, even multiple times in a day. That's like the bugs in the fruit. And then you have the nut. So Rabbi Nachman says, because all of the koach of Emunah, of the malchut, of faith, of tefillah, it all derives from the Brit. The way we see this parallel is very clear when you learn about Yosef and Yehuda. Because Yosef represents the living manifestation of the Yesod. He's the tzaddik of the generation. Yehuda, he is the living manifestation of Malchut, which ends up being King David, which ends up being the Mashiach, right? You'll notice that everything that happens in Yehuda's life only happens because of something that happens in Yosef's life. If you look at Vayigash, it's this interplay between them. Everything from Yosef, from the beginning until the end. In Yehuda's is always a response and reaction to Yosef, right? Yosef goes into slavery. Yehuda had to also go into exile. Just like when the Brit goes into exile, Tefillah goes into exile. What did Yosef tell his brothers? Everyone's going to bow down to me. This guy, an egomaniac. But he's telling you a very deep thing. When everybody is mevatel to me, you will be you to the fullest. When Yehuda is mevatel to me, he's going to be the Mashiach. They took it as a threat because they thought that if we are going to be attached to someone that's greater than us, that means that we won't be us to the fullest. Just like people in our generation, we think to ourselves, if we attach ourselves to a tzaddik and we listen to his advice no matter what, so where's me? And the secret is that is what allows you to become you to the fullest, because you yourself are a tzaddik. So when you follow the eitzah of the tzaddik, regardless of whatever you're thinking, then all of the negativity within you fades away. Rabbi Nachman compares the land of Israel. We know that the Torah says it vomits up its inhabitants. Rabbi Nachman says that even though that's a negative seemingly, it's actually the greatest positive. Because in the Zohar, they explain that the land of Israel is the physical manifestation of land, which is corresponding to the tzaddik of the generation. So what does it mean that if I'm going to be connected to the land, or I'm going to be connected to the tzaddik, I'm going to get thrown up? Which part of me is going to get thrown up? The part of me that I want to get rid of. All those things that are a barrier or obstacle to me achieving that closeness to Hashem, to the Torah, to Tadic, and to myself that I want, those things will get thrown up by the land of Israel. This is why Rabbi Nachman says it's impossible to achieve your spiritual potential except for in the land of Israel. Meaning, it's impossible to achieve your spiritual potential except through real attachment to the tzaddikim of the generation. It's possible. Because that's like, it's like when you eat food, he explains. You keep the vitamins, you keep the nutrients, you keep the tochen, you keep the good, and you get rid of all the excess. So too, when you attach yourself to the tzaddik of the generation, it's like he swallows up and vomits out all of the excess within you and leaves only you at the end. Okay?
Where's this? We have this week's fire chart. I want to very from myself.
Yeah.
Where do we see this exactly? Like to the point, to the T. Proof for everybody that should know that this is exactly guaranteed. This is not even it's not theoretical. It's Torah from this week's parsha. If anybody passes over anybody. There's one puzzle. And this week's puzzle.
They believed in Moshe and they believed in Hashem.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's also has to be acknowledging that Moshe is his servant.
Right, of course.
Exactly, always.
Okay. So,
None of our
but you
votes like Moshe.
but you see ultimately
He doesn't.
that how does the ocean split? And we know that the Zohar says that the splitting of the sea happened in 12 columns, and the 12 columns are corresponding to the 12 nusachs of tefillah, meaning the ocean splitting, Rabbi Nachman says in the ninth Torah of the Quran, is the concept of you getting your prayers answered in a big way. And that's the reason why the Gemara says it's as hard for Hashem to split the sea as it is for you to find your zivug. It's as hard for Hashem to split the sea as it is for him to bring you your parnasa. What's the connection between these three things? Because they all happen only through tefillah. Tefillah causes you to find your zivug. Tefillah causes you to have parnasa. So he says that they're all one thing. I understand, but then once each one split, they went in their own tribes. Each one went in their own tribes. Why did they go with their own tribe? Why didn't they just all go together? Because every tribe represents a different nusach of tefillah. Okay? So, great. But how did the ocean split? It's clear from Chazal, it only split because Moshe took Yosef's bones, and when it saw Yosef's bones, it split. But Nachshon was the one who went in. Nachshon's from Yehuda. The bones are Yosef's. Nachshon is Malchut, he's Amunah, he's faith, he's Bittel. Yosef's bones, he's the Tadic, he's the master of the Brit, he's the Tadic of the generation. So even though you have Nachshon going into the water, meaning your Amunah, it's effective only to the extent that it sees Yosef's bones. The word for bone is also from the same shorish as etzem, which means essence. The essence of Yosef it saw, the highest level of the Brit, and the ocean split through your Amunah. Okay, there's many parallels between all these things. So too, this is the reason why Mashiach ben Yosef has to come before Mashiach ben David. Why can't it be the other way around? Why do we need Yosef before David? And the reason is very simple. Because David has no light of his own. Mashiach ben David has no light of his own. All of his light comes from Mashiach ben Yosef. Just like the Malchut has no light of its own. To the extent that Mashiach ben Yosef is present, to that extent, Mashiach ben David can also be present. Okay? Emunah. How does that apply practically in my life? If Bezrat Hashem for these next 2 weeks, some of you or all of you, Bezrat Hashem, are willing to work with me on these things, and I'm with you in this. Really, I have a lot of work to do. So this last one is the biggest. Rabbi Nachman says the highest avoda of all avodat Hashem, the greatest tool to achieving closeness to Hashem and to maximizing every level of your potential. He says this is only possible through what is called hibodedut. Hibodedut comes from the word boded. Boded means to be secluded. Right now, you'll notice the world is in bidud. Bidud means that you need to seclude yourself. So that's the from the Sitra Achra. But then we have bidud of Kedusha. It's called hibodedut. Okay? People might think it's a chiddush of Rabbi Nachman, and it's not a chiddush of Rabbi Nachman. You see from all of the commentators of the Torah, if you look just in the Rabbeinu Bechaya and the Ramban, they're going to say, why did Hashem accept Hevel's Korban and not Cain? This is all the way in the beginning of creation. It says explicitly the Kli Yakar. Because Hevel was constantly in hibodedut, that's what he says. Because he was always in the field with the sheep, alone with Hashem, he was able to.
Let's say because he gave his finest.
And how did he give his finest? Why? No, this is it. You're asking a great question.
I don't know.
You have an opportunity. Cain also had the opportunity to. Why did Cain give something?
Which a cheapskate in comparison.
Why? Why? You're asking very good. Why?
Because his brother, I don't know.
Yeah, his brother had more. Thought about it.
Because it was more. Imagine every day you start off your day with 1 hour of listing out all your goals. What's important to you in your life? My family, my parents, my wife, my kids, me achieving my spiritual potential, me becoming my best self, me not leaving one leaf unturned. Imagine doing this for 1 hour a day in the beginning of your day, talking about who you want to become, who you want to be, what's important, and what's getting in the way. Imagine you started your day off like that every day. What becomes very clear to you? What's important? What becomes also very clear and fervent and entrenched in your mind and your heart? What's not important? When a person doesn't have that clarity, then he makes choices halfway. Only a person who's very sure of what's important and what his goal is in life on a daily basis is able to go and move towards that goal. You have two good people with tremendous neshamas. That Rabbi Akiva comes from the soul of Cain. The Mashiach comes from the soul of Cain. He could have been greater than Hevel. But Hevel was constantly, says the Kliyaka, in Hispodidus. He was always alone with Hashem, and because he was constantly alone with Hashem and away from things that were not as important, he was able to clarify for himself what's the only important thing. And when the time came for him to give a korban, it's obvious, I'm giving the whole thing. You understand? This is the question. You're asking an amazing question. That's us on every day, on a daily basis. You see a guy next to you, you're like, how does that guy go all the way? And I want to, and I don't. And there's one reason why. It's seared into this guy's brain, this guy's soul. What is the most important thing? That's it. How do I get up for Shachrit in the morning? If I think it's more important than not. That's what it is. It's that simple. It's not easy. It's very hard, but it's that simple. If I think what I'm going to do is more important than not doing it, I am going to do it. How do I get to the point that I don't just think it's important, I experience that it's important? It's by searing these goals into your mind. And you do that by talking them over. Yitzchak, when he was praying in the field, and he found his wife through that. The Gemara says, how do you find it? It says, hard for him to split the sea as to get the wife. Rabbi Nachman says the wife comes from tefillah. Where do you see that? As soon as Yitzchak was l'suach in the field, you see right after that, she comes. Connected.
Because his father sent a servant to go and fetch a wife.
That's all what it looks like. But you know the real reason? It's because he's doing his photodis in the field. And as a result of that, some servant is getting sent somewhere. And as a result of that, because Hashem has many ways of doing anything he wants to do, like we spoke about before. Hashem has so many ways of doing things for us, including in clothing himself in natural events, which appear to be something that's going to help you. But the real truth is, it's because Yitzchak is doing his bodadus in the field. And how do you know he's speaking to Hashem in an informal way, right? Because it sounds like that's a chiddush to speak to Hashem in an informal way, but he's the king. Because he didn't ledaber, he wasn't speaking to Hashem. L'suach, it comes from the word siach. Siach is a conversation you have with a friend, a conversation that a Rebbe gives over to you. It's a sicha. It's informal, it's friendly, it's loving. Many, many different instances of this. And obviously, you know, King David, the Mashiach, he was doing it every day. It became Tehillim. Yofi, very good. Okay. If you have a time every day, and this is the most important of everything that we spoke about. You know, people come over to me all the time. They go, what's more important? That I go to the mikveh in the morning or I do hisbodedus? And I know it's like heretical for me to say what I'm going to say and what I say to them. And people have called me out on it as being such. Or what's more important? That I take this time to do hisbodedus or that I learn Torah? Any question that's presented to me like this over the course of the past half a decade. The most important thing you can do is hisbodedus. And the reason is very simple. They asked once a great rabbi, I have a certain amount of time every day to learn Shas, to learn Gemara, to learn Musar. What should I do? And this was one of the Gemara masters of the generation. So he went to him, but dafka, because he thought he was going to get the answer Gemara and then get the chizik that he needed to feel confident. I'm going to go learn Gemara now every day during this little bit of time I have. He said you should learn Musar. He was shocked. You should learn about self-improvement. But you're literally the lamdin of the generation. How are you not going to tell me my little bit of time to learn Gemara every day? And he said it's very simple. Because if you really learn Musar for that little bit of time every day, you're going to realize you have a lot more time than you think you do. When a person has a time every day that he clarifies what's important for himself in life and what's not, he's going to realize he has more time for what's important, and he doesn't have to use it for things which are not as important as he thought. And when he has more time, then he's going to learn Torah. Then he's going to go to the mikveh. Then he's going to be shmir with the Brit. Then he's going to be able to fight against things that are a deterrent in his life, whether it's friends or family or a living space that's not good for me. All of these things, which would take a lot of courage and a lot of guts for me to get out of this situation, because it's really not healthy for me. And I know that, but how am I actually going to move beyond that? It has to be in your heart. And you need to clarify that for yourself every day. He spotted this, okay? I want to have a challenge together as brothers, as friends. You know, I'm nothing. I'm being honest. I'm not just saying that like out of false humility. I'm really nothing. But everything that I gave over is completely true today. And I know that because it comes from one of the tzaddikim of the generation. Okay? If you take the next 2 weeks to actually do these things and to have the guts, the courage for 2 weeks to say, you know, I'm going to take a little bit, you know, like people say, I have a cleanse. You have no problem spending hundreds of dollars on some garbage promotion that they give you, and your whole life goes back to like how it was. It doesn't even really help you. Okay. Shovavim, 2 weeks left. 2 weeks left that we could.
In a leap year, it's 4 extra 2 weeks.
Yeah. To make a little WhatsApp group. 2 weeks, I'm going to put the avoda down, the 7 steps. I promise you that if you try your very best on these 7 steps that we spoke about tonight, I'll make it very simple. It's not going to be an hour long or whatever this was like tonight. It's going to be, you just see it. You can look at it all the time. Your whole life is going to change. Really, mamish. I'm not a salesman. I left my job as a therapist, as a substance abuse counselor, as a social worker, where I could have theoretically made a lot more money so that I can teach Torah, because my goal my whole life was to bring peace. And I realized from Chazal that the only thing that brings peace is truth. I have nothing to gain from this, except that I hope that your life changes in the most positive way possible. And I'm here for you in that. I could be your friend. I want to be your friend. I'm in the boat with you. I'm on the journey with you, okay? So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And Bezrat Hashem, these next 2 weeks should help us become tzaddikim like we can be. We really can.
Before people leave, drink some wine.